Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're exploring Great Staughton and its people.
Wow, what a title, huh?
It is, and it really does live up to it. We've got Roman villas, medieval knights, 18th century scandals. It's all in here.
It's amazing to think about how one village can hold so much history.
Right. It's like a microcosm of England itself.
Exactly. From Roman Britain all the way to the World Wars, Great Staughton has seen it all. It really makes you think about how those big historical events played out in the lives of everyday people.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this book. It's not just dates and battles. It's the stories of the people who lived through it all.
For sure.
Okay, so let's dive in, shall we? Let's rewind all the way back to the Roman era.
Back to the Romans, all right.
This book talks about a Roman villa being discovered in Great Staughton. Can you imagine that? A piece of the Roman Empire right there in the English countryside.
I know, right? It was a pretty incredible find.
So tell me, how did they even find this villa? Did someone just trip over a mosaic while walking their dog?
Huh? Not quite. But it wasn't too far off. In the late 1940s, a local historian was walking through Rushy Farm and noticed some pottery fragments.
And its fragments turned out to be Roman.
They did, and that's what led to the excavation of the site.
Wow, so a chance discovery led to uncovering a piece of Roman Britain. That's awesome.
Totally.
What can you tell us about the villa itself? What did they find?
Well, it was a pretty substantial structure. It had multiple rooms, a hypocaust heating system, like underfloor heating.
Yes.
Right? And they even found traces of painted plaster on the walls. It must have been pretty colorful back in the day.
I can picture it. A little slice of Roman luxury right there in Great Staughton.
Exactly. Oh, and get this, they also found a hoard of Roman coins.
Coins, like buried treasure.
Not quite buried treasure, but pretty close. These coins were minted all over the Roman Empire, from Trier and Lugdunum to Rome itself, even some from as far away as Sicily, which is modern-day Croatia.
Wow, that's wild. So even a small village like Great Staughton was connected to this vast network of trade and travel.
Absolutely. It shows how far-reaching the Roman Empire was, even in its more remote corners.
So what do you think the villa was used for? Was it a grand estate or maybe a holiday home for some wealthy Roman?
Well, the book suggests it might have been a mansio.
A mansio, what's that?
It was basically a Roman inn or a kind of staging post along a major road.
So like a Roman travel lodge.
Yeah, something like that, but probably with much better amenities. These mansions were really important for communication and trade across the empire. Imagine soldiers, merchants, messengers, all stopping at this villa in Great Staughton as they made their way across Roman Britain.
That's such a cool image. I can almost picture them sitting around a fire sharing stories from their travels. It really brings history to life, doesn't it?
It does.
But of course, the Romans eventually left Britain. What happened to Great Staughton after that? Did it just fade away?
Well, as we'll see, Great Staughton is a village that knows how to adapt and survive.
I like that. So what happened next? Who came after the Romans?
Next up, we enter the world of Anglo-Saxon England.
Anglo-Saxons, all right. Let's hear it.
And it's during this time that we meet a fascinating character named Elfhelm Polga.
Elfhelm Polga, now that's a name. Who is this guy? And what's his connection to Great Staughton?
He was a wealthy thane, a kind of Anglo-Saxon nobleman, and he owned land in Great Staughton.
Oh, sounds important.
He was. And what makes him really interesting is that he left behind a will.
Ah, a will. Now you're talking my language. I love a good historical document. What kind of things did he leave behind?
Well, his will lists all sorts of possessions: land, weapons, writing equipment, even a particularly valuable cloak.
A cloak.
Yeah, seems like he was a bit of a fashion icon.
I love it. But seriously, these items tell us so much about life in Anglo-Saxon England.
Exactly. Land, of course, was a sign of wealth and power. Weapons were essential for protection and also as a status symbol.
Makes sense. You got to protect what you've got.
Right. And even that cloak, it shows that they cared about appearances and status.
It's fascinating how these everyday objects can transport us back in time, right?
Totally. You can almost picture Elfhelm riding through the countryside, surveying his land, that fancy cloak billowing behind him.
That's a great image. But the Anglo-Saxon era wouldn't last forever. What happened when the Normans arrived in 1066?
1066. The Norman Conquest, a major turning point in English history. And this is where things get a little mysterious.
Mysterious. I'm intrigued.
Well, the village is mentioned in the Doomsday Book, that big record of land holdings that William the Conqueror ordered.
So Great Staughton is in there.
It is, but under a totally different name. Touchstone?
Wait, Touchstone. That's a complete name change. Why would they do that?
Historians aren't entirely sure. There are a few theories. Maybe it was a way to signal a break from the Anglo-Saxon past, or maybe it was imposed by the Normans.
Think the village got a whole new identity after the conquest. Fascinating.
It is.
So even with the new name, life in Great Staughton, or Touchstone, went on. What happened next?
That's where we'll pick up next time.
All right, listeners, stay tuned. We'll be back soon to uncover more of Great Staughton's story.
Welcome back. We're picking up our journey through Great Staughton in the medieval period.
Okay, medieval times. Always a good time for a story.
Right. And Great Staughton has a pretty good one. This is where we meet Sir Adam de Creting.
Sir Adam de Creting, huh? That name sounds like it's straight out of a medieval romance.
It does, doesn't it? He was a knight who served King Edward III.
Wow, so a real deal knight. That's pretty
Yeah.
impressive.
It is. And he had this grand manor called Creatingsbury, complete with moats and fish ponds and all that.
Okay, now that's living the dream, a medieval manor with all the bells and whistles.
Right. He was definitely a man of status and wealth.
So was Sir Adam just some rich guy hanging out in his fancy manor? Or was he out there doing knightly things?
Oh, he was definitely involved in some action. The book mentions him fighting in the Welsh and Scottish wars.
No way. So he was a warrior as well as a lord of the manor? That's pretty badass.
He was. There's even a mention of him in the Song of Caerlaverock, a medieval poem that lists all the knights who were at the siege of Caerlaverock Castle.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So we're talking about a real historical figure here.
We are, and his story doesn't end there.
What else happened?
Well, Sir Adam actually died in a skirmish in Gascony.
Gascony. Wow, that's a long way from Great Staughton. He really got around.
He did. It makes you wonder what it must have been like to travel such vast distances back then.
It must have been a real adventure, but also incredibly dangerous.
Definitely.
So we've got knights and battles and travel to far-off lands. What else happened in Great Staughton during the medieval period?
Well, not everything was about fighting and conquering. There were other, less violent upheavals as well.
Oh, like what?
Well, let's fast forward a few centuries to the 18th century.
18th century, all right. What's happening in Great Staughton now?
This is when a big scandal rocks the village.
A scandal. Ooh, I love a good historical scandal. Tell me more.
It involves James Duberly, the wealthy clothier who bought the Gaines Hall estate. Remember him?
Yeah, the guy with the fancy Roman villa heating system.
Yeah. That's the one. Well, his wife, Rebecca, gets caught up in an affair with General John Gunning.
Okay, a wealthy clothier, a beautiful wife, a dashing general. Sounds like we've got all the ingredients for a juicy scandal. What happened? Did they run off together?
Not quite.
Ah.
But the affair did lead to a very public and messy divorce trial.
A divorce trial in the 18th century. I bet that was a huge deal back then.
It was. It was all anyone in the village could talk about.
I can imagine. So what happened? Did Rebecca and the general get what they wanted?
Well, they did get divorced, but the scandal had a lasting impact on their reputations.
I bet. Gossip travels fast, even without social media.
Exactly. The story was even turned into a book called Apology for the Life of Major General John Gunning.
A whole book dedicated to the scandal. That's amazing. I guess everyone loves a good love triangle.
Apparently so.
So from medieval knights to 18th century scandals, Great Staughton has seen its fair share of drama. What else is in store for this little village?
Well, our journey isn't over yet. We've still got centuries of history to explore. All right, let's jump into the 19th century in Great Staughton.
19th century, what's in store for us now?
Well, we're about to meet another fascinating Duberly.
Another Duberly. I thought we were done with that family after all the scandal back in the 18th century.
Not quite. This time, we're talking about Fanny Duberly.
Fanny Duberly. Okay, who is she?
She was married to Henry Duberly, an officer in the 8th Hussars.
The 8th Hussars. That's a cavalry regiment, right?
Yep, exactly. And Fanny traveled with her husband even during wartime.
Whoa, wait a minute. A woman traveling with the army in the 19th century? That's pretty unusual, right?
It was definitely not the norm. But Fanny was no ordinary woman. She even kept detailed journals about her experiences.
Journals. So she was like a war correspondent.
Kind of. She witnessed some pretty incredible things. The charge of the Light Brigade at Balaclava. She even met Florence Nightingale.
Wow, that's amazing. Talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Right. And she didn't just observe, she wrote it all down. Her journals give us a really unique perspective on these historical events.
That's so valuable to have those firsthand accounts from someone who was actually there.
Yeah.
What kind of things did she write about?
Well, everything. She described the battles, the people she met, the hardships of army life. She even traveled through India during the Sepoy Rebellion.
She sounds like quite the adventurer.
She was. and a keen observer of the world around her. Her journals are full of insights into the social and cultural landscapes she encountered.
I can imagine those journals must be fascinating to read.
They are, and they really highlight the human cost of war and the complexities of colonial life.
It's so important to remember those personal stories, especially the voices that are often left out of the history books.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got Fanny Duberly traveling the world and witnessing history firsthand. But what about Great Staughton itself? How did these global events like the World Wars impact life in the village?
Well, like many villages across England, Great Staughton felt the impact of those wars very deeply.
Yeah, I can imagine. Did the book mention any specific stories from that time?
It did. The book talks about the sacrifices made by the men of Great Staughton who fought in both world wars.
A reminder that even in a small village, these global conflicts had a very real and personal impact.
Exactly. And there's a poignant mention of another Duberly, William Michael Cunliffe Duberly, who was killed in action in Italy during World War II.
That's heartbreaking. It really brings home the cost of war, even in a quiet corner of England.
It does. And during World War II, Great Staughton actually played a more active role in the conflict than you might expect.
Really? How so?
Remember Gaines Hall, that grand estate we talked about earlier?
Yeah, the one that was at the center of that 18th century scandal.
That's the one. Well, during World War II, it was used as a secret training center for SOE agents.
SOE agents, what you mean spies?
Yep. They were trained in espionage, sabotage, all sorts of covert operations.
Wow, so Great Staughton had a secret spy school. That's incredible.
It is. It just goes to show that you never know what secrets might be hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly ordinary village.
Right. And that's what makes history so fascinating. There's always more to discover, always another layer to uncover.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a fantastic journey. From Roman villas to Anglo-Saxon wills, from medieval knights to secret spy schools, Great Staughton has truly seen it all.
It really has. And it makes you think about all the stories that are hidden in our own communities, just waiting to be uncovered.
Exactly. So to our listeners, we encourage you to explore the history of your own hometowns. You might be surprised by what you find. Who knows? Maybe your town was once home to Roman emperors or secret agents or, well, you never know. So get out there, explore, and discover the fascinating stories that are all around you. Thanks for joining us.